see the pressure change here. The first wells come online in January 2010, and now in 2011, both of them are online. And so sort of looking at this final figure from December 2013, we're looking at the effects of, sort of the combined effects of the production and the injection. And you can see stress changes are pretty high right at the edge of where this seismicity is occurring. I next wanted to point out very briefly a very different kind of study. Instead of looking things on a case-by-case basis, Matt Weingart and colleagues decided to really look at sort of all of the seismicity in the central U.S. and say, are there things sort of on a broader scale that we can say about this seismicity? And so here's a distribution of saltwater disposal wells that are active in the United States. Things are cut off to the east and west. There's 27,000. And this is just a sort of density plot showing these. And you can see that they're really focused here sort of along the Nemaha Ridge here, going from central Texas all the way up into southern Kansas. And so there's a number of different areas with a whole lot of injection wells. And he also considered whether the enhanced oil recovery wells could be responsible. And you can see there's a lot more. There's about 80,000 of these wells in the United States. And again, the density distribution is pretty different. Where these wells are happening, where these wells are being drilled is significantly different from the disposal wells. And so what Matt was trying to understand is, what are the controls? When will these wells be associated with these earthquakes? And so he took a look at, all of the earthquakes in the central United States over a period of, again, 35 years, and he looked at all of the earthquakes. And he said, are these earthquakes within 15 kilometers of an active injection well? And what you see is all of these red dots are earthquakes that are associated with the well. And so that isn't making a causative statement. That's just saying that they're within 15 kilometers of an active well. And you can see that there's actually a whole lot of wells that are earthquakes that have no wells nearby. But he's, what we're really interested in this study is not knowing, which earthquakes are associated with wells, but in fact, which wells are associated with earthquakes. Are there different parameters that we can sort of suss out to see whether or not they're causing earthquakes? And so, this map is just sort of the converse. The yellow dots are showing you wells that are associated with earthquakes. And looking at a count of earthquakes, again, we recognize this sort of hockey stick graph showing the dramatic increase in earthquakes. And this black line is showing us sort of the count of non-associated earthquakes, earthquakes that can't be potentially connected with injection wells. And you can see it stays pretty flat. And so pretty much all of the slack of this increase is being taken up by this sort of red bar, the associated earthquakes. Now, it's not due to a sort of change in the number of injection wells. We haven't just thrown up a ton more injection wells. You can see this is the number of injection wells completed per year. And, certainly it's increased, but it's not really out of line relative to the number of injection wells that we've seen. So what Matt wanted to do is, are there certain parameters that control whether or not these wells are inducing earthquakes? And so what's shown here is a count of the number of wells plotted against the annual injection rate, or the monthly injection rate, and then total volume. These are really the two parameters that people think about most. Is the injection rate controlling whether or not you're going to cause earthquakes, or is it maybe just the total amount that you put in? And looking at this, you certainly see that as you get to higher and higher injection rates, more and more of these bars are being taken up by yellow, which are the associated wells that can potentially be connected to earthquakes. And so looking at it as a percentage of the wells, what you can see based on injection rate, things pretty much rattle around at 40% or so for injection rates below about 300,000 barrels a month. And then it really starts to rise up. These red bars are just showing you our confidence bounds. Basically, if you lie above or below this, we can say with statistical confidence that there is a connection with these two parameters. So injection rate sort of above 150, 300,000 barrels a month really does seem to control or affect the likelihood that a well will induce earthquakes. Looking at cumulative injection, we really are staying within our confidence bounds pretty much the whole time. So it really doesn't look like total injected volume really is relevant. There's a few other parameters that were explored in the study. We might expect that the proximity to basement, the distance of the well to the sort of the strong rocks that can actually support earthquakes would affect how likely it is to induce an earthquake, and there wasn't no effect of that was seen within the study, nor was injection pressure. Did that appear to affect the likelihood of inducing earthquakes? And that really sort of leads us, to the question, geologic factors. Obviously, the geology of the area is very, very important. Are there faults nearby? Are the stress conditions, such that you could actually produce earthquakes in the area? There's a lot of, is there a hydraulic connection from your injection horizon to where these faults are? There's a lot of different questions that aren't answered in this study. So just to wrap up, what is our outlook? Certainly we can control induced earthquakes to some degree by varying the injection pressure. Just at 3 different sites, we've seen that we're able to increase and decrease the number of earthquakes based on the fluid pressure. We've seen that forcing a shutdown, terminating injection, has also reduced or even terminated earthquake readings. But this is not a silver bullet, as we saw in the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, where the largest earthquake actually happened over a year after injection terminated. A number of states are actually trying to handle this problem. There's sort of a cabal of 5 states here, Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas, that have all considered or are enacting regulations on hydraulic fracturing and or wastewater disposal, as well as Ohio and California. So people are starting to think about how do we reduce our risk. The EPA, who sort of sets the baseline standards for fluid injection related to oil and gas, has released guidance on how to minimize induced earthquakes, but not official regulations. And we at the USGS have released a preliminary model for estimating the hazard from induced earthquakes. How do we take the injection information, how do we take the earthquake information and forecast what the likelihood there is of strong shaking? And this is, for natural earthquakes, this is something that we've been doing for 20 or 30 years. It's a very important part of sort of the USGS earthquake program, but we're looking at a very different beast because these earthquakes can be turned off and on. And so this is just an example of what this hazard calculation might look like. This is the hazard without induced earthquakes. This is the hazard with, so that you can see a dramatic change. So moving forward, I think there's a lot of hope. It really does look like, we're able to some degree manage these earthquakes. But, the high earthquake rates are continuing. The earthquake rate is higher in Oklahoma than it's ever been. I think to some degree we're fortunate that there has not yet been a large earthquake. And we also need to sort of consider that earthquakes in the central U.S. are potentially more dangerous than those here because they don't have building codes like we do here. They're not building to prepare for earthquakes. Moving forward, we really need to continue collaboration and cooperation between industry scientists, government scientists, academic scientists, because everybody brings a different piece to the puzzle. We all have different information, different knowledge about earthquakes or the oil and gas fields. And this really requires, a lot of data sharing and working together, and clearly more research is needed. So last, I just want to mention, this really is a very fast-moving field. 2 different special issues in scientific journals have come out just in the past 6 months, looking at induced seismicity, both seismological research letters, which is really an earthquake science-based journal, as well as the Leading Edge, which is an oil and gas journal, both dedicated special issues to understanding these issues. In the back, I put a copy of the publication that I recently released, sort of providing a plain English, or what I hope is plain English, review of induced seismicity. And also, just lastly, I'll point you to our website at the USGS, where you can get a lot more information about induced earthquakes. Thanks.
Questions? I have a question. Okay. Does anybody have a question before I do that? So, Justin, I see that on the map in the middle. So, I guess my question, I see that Michigan has a lot of, but no seismicity. And so, So I know that conditions are different there. What do you think are the conditions that are causing seismicity in Oklahoma versus, Michigan?
That's a really good question. I was actually an author on this paper, and this was the question that I was beating Matt up about. And actually, after this paper was accepted but not published, there was a magnitude 4 right in there. But and in fact, there are high-rate wells here. My guess would be, it's some combination of geologic factors. Either, there aren't fluid pathways for the fluid pressure to get propagated to the depths where you could actually produce earthquakes. Maybe there are faults with appropriate orientations to actually produce these. That would probably be my guess, is that the faults aren't oriented appropriately to produce earthquakes based on the local stress conditions. But this is one of the things that's really, really difficult in this field, is that we don't know where all the faults are. Most of the faults that we know about are ones that have clear geologic expressions, where you can see sag ponds, or you can see things being uplifted. But we're far from knowing everything, and sort of standard seismological techniques to survey for oil, if a fault is in the basement, in this crystalline formation, you're not going to see it. And just an example of not knowing about faults, if you go to the 1994 Northridge earthquake in the LA Valley, this earthquake happened on a fault we didn't know about, in the most seismogenic state in the U.S. So there are faults that we don't know about, so I think that's a big part of it.
Thank you.
Sort of along those lines, two different questions. One, you mentioned the LA Valley, and of course, what everyone's thinking about right now is that spewing natural gas situation. And I respect the idea that the gas companies don't want things like this to happen. But are these the kinds of things that could happen with some of these deep, you said they have to be capped, they're under high pressure, they're some similar situations that could be a problem, and how do they deal with the water coming up, the slurry of water and oil?
How do they prevent it from coming up the well, or?
Coming back up the well the way that it's happening in...
Well, I mean, the Deepwater Horizon well in the Gulf of Mexico is the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a comedy of errors. There were so many things that sort of had to go wrong to wind up with that situation.
Oh, you mean in...
At Deepwater Horizon.
But then this one here.
Yeah, I'm not fully versed in what happened at that particular well, but the wells are going to fail. That is sort of the end of the game.
What I've heard, this is completely from the lay perspective, so if there's someone who knows better, is that because of this horizontal drilling and because of the ability to go very deep, but not necessarily the concomitant risk aversion to know how to shut it off when it goes wrong, it broke really, really deep and they couldn't stop it.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's fine.
I mean,
Just if I hear deep wells.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of these things that, no matter how well you do something, there are going to be failures. They're very, very infrequent.
Question.
In one of your early slides, you had the background induced earthquake rate increasing at an increasing rate even without the oil and gas. So that's what you were kind of getting to. Was that true, or did I misread it?
No.
Correct.
I mean, this figure more or less addresses that. So this is sort of the background rate right here, shown in black.
Yeah, I got that. But in one of the very early ones, you had a graph showing an increase.
Oh, I know what you're looking at, and I have actually a very good answer. Maybe we'll look at this.
Yeah.
So are you talking about this kink right here?
Kind of just about the baseline. Is that? I can't quite read my own eyes the y-axis, but is that an increase?
So there's an increase actually in 2001, and these are actually induced earthquakes. This is the Raton Basin right here, and it's just the way this figure was made was the cutoff was at 2009.
Okay, I think it might be more basic than that. It's certainly increasing from 1995 to the presence?
No. That was just weird.
Just the baseline. Isn't the baseline an increase?
No.
Is that a rating?
It's cumulative.
This is,
Cumulative. Thank you. I wasn't sure what the.
no, that's cumulative, yeah, sorry.
That's fine.
You had mentioned that there's legislation being introduced in numerous states, including California. How is the USGS involved in that, if at all? Do you guys give recommendations, or?
Well, so, I mean, a very important part of the USGS is we are not a regulatory agency. We provide, we're here to provide the best possible science for people to make decisions. And so we certainly worked with DOGGR, which is the Department of Gas and Geothermal Resources, which is the regulatory body here in California, providing them input, on the regulations. Part of the regulations are based upon known locations of faults, locations of earthquakes, and so we've provided them information about, really what are our capabilities. We've also worked, with Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, providing them information to inform their regulations as well. But it's really on a level of providing scientific information, which I think is very fortunate.
Along those lines about regulations, do you know what, and you may not, but you know what kind of regulations they're thinking about? I mean, would we,
Well, so there's
placement or amount of water or?
So there's actually, most of these states actually have the regulations in place. California is Senate Bill 4 from 2014. And, it's only regulating, or only intended to regulate hydraulic fracturing. And it's sort of based upon proximity of the well to past earthquakes, known faults, ongoing, new earthquakes, whether that frac job gets shut down, whether that frac job is even allowed. As I've shown you, I don't think that that's necessarily the right regulation that we need in California. Looking for induced earthquakes in California is much more difficult than it is, say, in Kansas or Oklahoma, because we have this large background earthquake rate. California certainly does have a history of induced earthquakes. We've got just about every kind of induced earthquake. But in general, it's much more difficult to identify. In Kansas and in Oklahoma, it's been much more of a reactive thing, in that they're shutting down wells or requiring wells to decrease if they're nearby to earthquakes. Kansas is now requiring a much more rigorous evaluation of the seismic hazard as is Texas. Keep in mind, nobody's drilling new wells right now. The price of oil is so low that nobody's doing it. Nobody's doing any of this anyway. So
Not injecting?
Well, no, they're injection is continuing, but nobody's drilling new production.
Okay.
No.
But water is still being put.
The amount of water, in fact, the amount of water being injected is decreasing.
Okay.
Because the price of oil is low, they're not going to be pulling as much now. But, eventually when the price of oil goes back up, there are these new regulations based upon, proximity to earlier earthquakes and faults. And certainly there are, some of the regulations, for example, in Kansas, it applied to wells with permits above 8,000 barrels. And they said you have to back off to, X rate and then Y rate and Z rate over sort of a half-year period or something like that. But, so it's, everybody's doing it a little bit differently, and, we'll see how it comes out. I think, with the economics of oil and gas right now, it'll be a little bit difficult to see how it all works out.
Is there a possibility that your research could contribute to some economic liability on the part of the injector? In Oklahoma City in particular, this looks like a ticking time bomb, right? Economically. Because it's such a big, it's a population.
Sure.
center.
Well, there are ongoing lawsuits, class action lawsuits in a number of states suing oil and gas, and obviously our science is out there and it informs people. Is what it is.
That's what it is.
I don't know if I qualify I did feel good about being in an unreinforced masonry building when I was there. But yeah, it's certainly something I think about when I'm out there. Is this structure safe?
Yeah. I mean, on one hand, I say, does it contribute to the economic viability? On the other hand, do you feel that your work is contributing to possible future safety for all of those people in Oklahoma?
No, it's really nice. It's really nice as a scientist. It's not often that what you do actually affects society, at least in a in not a 20-year time frame.